Why is letting in just as important as letting go? Today's guest, Uwe Dockhorn, joins us to talk about the power of letting go of negativity and why it's so important to take that next step and let in positivity. Are medical professionals and business executives more similar than we think? How can we learn to articulate abstract concepts? And what can you do to level up your marriage? Uwe, Otis, and I dive into all this and much more in this fun and informative episode. Quick reminder to rate, review, and subscribe to the show wherever you're listening. You can also find the full videos of the show on our YouTube page. And if you learned something from Uwe, Otis, or me in our conversation, make sure to share the episode with someone else so they can learn it too. The best way to support our show is to share your favorite episodes with the rest of your tribe. This episode is brought to you by Tribe and Purpose. That transition from college to that first career is a difficult one. And it's even harder when you lose your sense of identity. If you're an athlete who just hung up the cleats, it's hard to go from being a rugby player to being Joe in accounting. We created Next is Best to help retired college athletes use their skills to create an impact through entrepreneurship. Next is Best by Know Your Tribe will help you to smoothen that rough transition by helping you establish a clear sense of purpose, an actionable path to success, and the tools you need to manage your life. Your 20s are a confusing and chaotic time. Next is Best gives you the tools you need to make sense of the chaos and make this next chapter of your life the best one yet. You can learn more about Next is Best by Know Your Tribe at findyourpurpose.coach. Now here's Cam Otis with the show.
Hey, welcome to the Cam Otis Show. We're a father-son business podcast where we talk with other lifelong learners about making an impact and solving big problems. And I'm excited for today. Just so you all know, my side was hurting during our pre-show that we had with our guest today, Uwe Dockhorn. Uwe, man, good to see you.
Wow, it's a pleasure seeing you both, Otis and Camden. It's really a pleasure being here today. Yes, it's amazing, and it's Groundhog Day, right?
Yes, yes. I knew that was going to come up.
I wasn't sure if I was just kind of like dressed properly for the occasion of Groundhog Day, so I just wanted to make an effort.
You're supposed to wear green.
So okay. Yeah, okay. Thank you for the note. Thank you.
Yeah. He did send us that email last night. While we're talking Groundhog's Day, I got to say I saw the stat. He's batting 39% all-time accuracy on his weather predictions. So, fun tradition, but I was hoping he'd be at least 500.
Yeah. It's and he said 6 more weeks of winter, which. Yeah, that's going to happen anyways. At least where I live is definitely going to be 6 more weeks away.
Same here. So yeah.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
We don't get the 6 weeks of winter down here in Arizona, though. It's warming up, so
well,
maybe that's the 39% accuracy. Out. Yeah, exactly.
Well, you have my jealousy. Thank you.
So, Uwe, I'm always curious when somebody makes the jump from corporate to not just entrepreneur, but entrepreneur in the helping people realm. What was the catalyst? What happened there that that I guess said change what you've been doing?
Well, to be honest, I wasn't in corporate that much. I was working with executives right from the start when I started. In 2008 or something like that, and it's over 17,000 sessions ago. So yes, it is that much. So it's like, got it. And so I worked in corporate, but I always was more like aiming for, kind of like making my own decisions, having the own responsibilities and so on. And so there was kind of really the urge. And, my parents, we had a coffee shop, so was growing up in hospitality. And so the serving was always there. And, but then also because we had to give up that coffee shop after my dad died when I was 23. And so it was really for me kind of like, one side was always kind of like being the entrepreneur, but then also going into corporate and working in corporate was never fulfilling to me. So there was a long time of struggling as the solopreneur, let's put it that way. Mm-hmm. But there's also a little bit more to that, and I don't know if that's okay. I can share. It's really the backstory of it. It's a bit more tragic, if that's okay.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we're okay with tragic. I just have to prepare myself. So,
Yeah, so that's what I wanted to give ahead, because essentially it goes also back to 6 days before Christmas in 2016, and my mother died. And I always cherished that I was there for her, holding her hands when she left. And you see, I loved my family. It was my safe haven. Although they gave me their love and protection, as a young boy I was sexually abused and told no one. And then after I lost two very important family members, my uncle when I was 16, and I was just mentioned, my father when I was 23. And, this was the moment when something just broke inside of me. And, I started to believe that the remaining members of my family had just given up on me. And I distanced myself from them, even my mother, because I felt I couldn't risk opening up to them. And so I became isolated, separated from friends, lost my job, was overwhelmed, physically and emotionally exhausted, and felt there was no reason for being in this world. And, I wasn't sad or angry. And the truth is, I didn't feel anything at all. And that's when I found myself on the edge of a bridge, and it was one cold winter night. And, I could see even my breath as I slowly leaned forward, and I let go. But at that moment, something happened. And for the very first time since my father had died, I felt something inside me, and that drew me back from jumping. And, it literally saved my life. And that night, I learned an important lesson. And, I learned that transformation requires more than letting go of the status quo. Without the other half of the equation, letting go just leaves you in free fall. So if all I had done on that bridge was to let go, I would not be here talking to you today. So you're probably wondering, what is the other half? Well, the second half of the equation is to feel, perceive, and let in what is already there. So letting go and letting in, it's a two-part mechanism, and they're only complete as a pair. And on that bridge, all those years ago, I let in a small spark that grew into a powerful flame. And I made myself a promise that I'm still keeping today, to make it my life's mission to help others learn this secret. Because letting go and letting in is crucial for your well-being and your family's happiness, which I'm always talking about. So letting in energy, positive thoughts, and a sense of certainty, and letting go of self-doubt, fear, negativity, and stress. And it really is that simple. And the more you do it, the more it happens. And it's kind of like a switch that you can consciously flip to strengthen and re-energize your relationship with your partner every single day. And it also can become a switch as your own anti-burnout system. And it even can divorce-proof your marriage. So that's why I do what I do. And essentially, from that day on, I was on that path of constant personal growth. But that was my pivotal moment that changed everything in my life, and that enabled me to be who I am today.
Could you talk a little? I think we talk about, and most people are familiar with the concept of letting go. I think that letting in is a little bit different. Could you define that some more for us?
Absolutely. So the letting in piece is, as I mentioned, so it's something, we are so, well, whenever we talk about transformation and so on, we hear that we need to let go of things. And somehow we have to go through that, and we have to be kind of like, somehow it changes over time. So kind of like it's obscure how this is happening. But what I realized on that night, on the edge of that bridge, was that letting go is really only the first half of it. that there's something else waiting for all of us. And because we're so close to it and it's inside of us, it's kind of like sitting right under our noses. And because we can see it, we don't recognize it. But you know, what I do with my clients is help them to learn and practice this, that they need to let go of false, sticky family relationship beliefs that they carry with them. We all have those, right? And you know, that the moment you let go, you are ready to let in something else that is more positive and hopeful. And in that very moment, you are ready to allow yourself to embrace something that is there waiting for you to be articulated, to be determined, so that you can say, and I guide my clients really through that process. It's a really deep and thorough, well, I'm German, that helps, to process and to get to that point where they are ready and able to let go of something I call the core elephant thinking. Essentially, it's the core false belief that started all this. It's kind of like the first domino piece in our history, in our back. And really, after identifying it, then to let that go. And just can you imagine what else is there? But because we're not going, or we are not guided to that point where we consciously are, are able to embrace something else and articulate it in that very moment, that is the power. Because in that moment you start to create who you can be, what beliefs there are. What does it mean for you? How would you behave differently? What can you start to believe that is more positive and hopeful? And this experience it's kind of like the equivalent of creating a new memory inside of us. And therefore, when we go along and practice letting in something else that we started to believe, we create a new belief, in that from that experience. And we let us carry on that. And then we grow and we do each step after step after step. And then when we come to a point where we make mistakes, and we will make mistakes, because we're kind of like, just imagine how much time it has taken to kind of like get to that point to let go that one before. So it takes years, decades even, to really get to that point. And now seeing the reverse process of like creating a new belief system inside of you takes time. But when you are challenged by these missteps, or when you feel like, oh gosh, there are some things I thought I have dealt with it, and then it's occurring again to yourself, and it's like, oh, but I've done it before. I've had this experience to let in something else. So that is your fallback. That's your say. It's kind of like really that piece that enables you to trust yourself and find that, what I always talk about is that internal certainty about yourself. That is much more important than anything else, because if you're certain about yourself, then confidence, authenticity, and all that is just automatically inside of you as an effect. Because you can really go to that point of internal certainty. And so I hope this explains a little bit more what's on the other side. And we can talk hours how it's going to be, when you go through that process. But essentially, it's an experience. And so this is what I help my clients walk through that. And if I may, I just, it's really because I work with these high achiever families, and from, high achiever families, what I mean, so work with executives, medical professionals, business owners, and, as I call them, the very important partners, the VIPs at home. And what happens typically from their perspective is, they feel too often they are down here, the VIPs, right? So, and then there's the breadwinner who is kind of like up here, and they resent that. They feel abandoned. They ask themselves, what about me? What's the next step in my career? Why don't you spend more time with me and the kids? So the anguish and arguments start, and, big D is looming at the horizon. If they decide to go that pathway of a divorce, essentially it means to live an independent life outside of marriage. So this is where I come into the picture, because what I do differently, because I'm not a family counselor, I'm not a family therapist, I coach both partners at the same time, but separately. So they can regain their independence within the relationship and start to level up to each other. And we do this in regular evaluation sessions, which we call falling back in love sessions. So, and in these sessions, they realize, oh gosh, this is why I trigger you with my core elephant thinking, or my false belief, or my sticky family pattern, and vice versa. And because they've dealt with it on their own first, separately, they are now ready to embrace and discover their truest and deepest connection with each other. And therefore, they can upgrade their relationship to an interdependent one, where they can enjoy more intimacy, adventures, more free time, and from the perspective of the executive, better results at work, because they can relate and be certain that they gain their motivation at home, so they can spend the motivation at work and repeat.
Oh yeah, yeah. You know, that's one of the things we talked about in the military. You know, because you think about, you're deployed all the time, and if you know everything's okay back at home, then you can focus on the mission at hand. And what I've seen happen is, when things are falling apart back at home, whether it's, you know, the infamous Dear John letter, or finances, or sick kid, or whatever, then the soldier can't focus on what he's doing. And that's the exact same thing you're talking about, even for an executive. If, you know, that there's, you know, it's one of my things I help all my clients understand is there's no work-life balance. It's all life, right? So you can't just shut off the frustrations at work when you go home. You can't shut off the troubles that you're having in a relationship when you show up at work. It doesn't work that way, because there's only one you, right?
Absolutely, yeah, that's totally right. And while you're mentioning it, it's, you know, when I work with C-suites and, corporate, I often hear that, they say, yeah, well, we try to separate, family from the work, and they say, fair enough. So just to give you an example, so what happens if you see that your colleague, for the last couple of weeks is somehow under the radar? So what's the first thought that comes to mind? Anything okay at home? Mm-hmm. Right? So there it is. That is the correlation that is always there, as you just mentioned also. Yeah, it's there. And so you can't ignore it. Well, you can, but then you're more likely to experience burnout and tap into all these kinds of issues.
The other thing that was coming to mind, I was just thinking, putting my physics hat on, which it's not a very big hat. I can just tell you that. It's a very small, my physics hat is very, very small. But it was actually something that my dad has said for years, because he always jokes about it with the workbench in the garage, that nature abhors a vacuum. And that's what I'm imagining when you're talking about getting rid of it, letting it go, but then learning that there's a choice that what you let back in. I think that's a powerful thing to remember, is you still have to make that choice.
Well, you're speaking exactly to also not only my experience of all these years with my clients. It's what happened to myself. It's really that it comes down to independent free will, because there's a gap, as we know, between the impulse and the response, and in that gap exists independent free will to make that choice. It depends on the circumstances. Yes, we are not living in a vacuum, but definitely there are, a choice to be made consciously. So, and when you have never had the chance to train your ability to embrace what else is there, when you're not even aware of what is that potential, what is in my treasure chest, what is in my treasure chamber. I go really through that process to let my clients explore what is it, how would you call it, how does it look like inside of you, to really walk into that. What do you find in there? So, and by letting in that moment, and this is what I tell them a little bit afterwards, so spoiler ahead. So it's kind of like, so, well, you know, you just found a couple steps ago the key to your treasure chamber. Because there it is. Only after you did let go, only after I did let go, I was able to feel again. I cried for hours in that night, because the first time I really cried about my dad who died earlier. And so this was the first time I was able to really let go of all that and embrace the emotion that was there. And it's so powerful that you mentioned this as well. And it's, you know, the letting in part, there's one, I would say, little caveat, because we are entering independence land, right? And that means new rules. So it's not like, because when you are still trapped in dependence land, which means like, oh yeah, there are false beliefs that holding me back, blockages from my youth or whatever, you know, and that is a total different paradigm. And so by letting go, you are also capable of letting in a new paradigm. And in this new paradigm, which we call independence land, what it means is, well, you have to honor it. It's up to you, because nobody else is doing it for you. And that is what, you know, my clients learn more and more, to really honor that and being able to determine what they are capable of doing. And so I think you, in the military, you learn a lot about, you know, kind of like how to honor something, but it really is also not only your own independence is at risk, but that of your comrades too, and your community.
I think one of the interesting things there is, and we've talked about this before on the show, is the desire to reject things is a very natural, you know, the natural social rebellion that happens every 10 years between generations and that type of thing. But what you're getting at, Uwe, is that rejection for the sake of rejection is a problem, because it creates that vacuum like you were talking about. And then whatever comes in there, you don't have as much control over, because it's a vacuum. You know, I think whenever we talk power vacuums, I always think, probably because I'm a military brat, but I think in the military sense of, you know, you topple the bad dictator and it's like, well, what's going to happen next? Nobody really knows. It could be this guy popping up, it could be anyone else. And that's what happens with those ideas. And I think there's an interesting piece there connecting back to what you're talking about with the marriages, is that when we separate things into work and to life, we create those kind of vacuums for those feelings. And what I mean by that is, when you're in the conversation with your wife, you may go through and say, okay, I understand where you're coming from, I support you. And you know, you might be able to say all the right things. But then if you bottle that up and then go to work, that vacuum then is there of, it's like, oh, well, it's just BS at home, you know, it's all da-da-da. And you can easily spin that into a negative. Whereas I think, kind of like you were saying, Dad, if you approach that all as, you know, it's all life as a whole, then you're no longer allowing that opportunity for those negative things to come in. What I want to flip that to is then, how do you think that applies in business relationships? Because we're kind of viewing it from, you know, life as a whole, our relationships and how that sets us up for business. I kind of want to flip that on its head a little bit, of your business relationships and how that sets you up for home. What are your thoughts there, Uwe?
Absolutely. So, you know, it's, of course, first of all, again, it's connected. So it's never kind of like you're never in the vacuum, but of course you focus differently. Your focus is differently when you're talking about the business side of things, and you are enabled to have that essence of more certainty. But it's also kind of like, you know, there are many clients I you know, they encounter, for example, they don't want to go home, so they spend more time at work, and so that creates guilt on the one side, but also kind of justification of like, yeah, I do this for us, for the family. So that's kind of like the side, you know, before they work with me, so kind of like often, and but on the other side, the spouse, the life partner says, you know what, I feel alone, and you know, I don't feel supported. Or, you know, it can also be that they feel like they not only want to provide emotionally to the family, they also want to provide financially. They want to contribute. They want to have that sense of contribution and recognition. So all these things come together and enable both sides to be at their best. And therefore, it has the direct influx in, for example, in commitment at work. So because when you are really experiencing that certainty, that motivation from home, what can shake you? What is there that can shake you? What is you kind of like, so as you mentioned earlier, Otis, so if you're in battle, it's kind of like, yeah, you're focused, you're confident, you're absolutely there. If you know everything else is certain to a point, and then you can focus better. You make better decisions, faster and quicker. You be more efficient because of that certainty. You have that deeper understanding of what's going on. And in relationships, it's especially important because essentially what I do is I help to develop your personal growth within the relationship. So, and that does count at home and at work. So when you become a better partner at home, you will also become a better leader at work. So it just, goes always in both ways. And so you can see it really as the equivalent. So the more success you have at home, the more success you will have at work. The more success with that knowledge at work, the more free time you will spend with your loved ones. Because that is the success. Because their loved ones, they want you to spend more time with you. So there's always this, so the letting go, letting in part is in everything. So it means you can't only see the one piece, you always have to see it at least from these two perspectives. What does it mean?
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Cam Otis Show. If you're enjoying this conversation, then make sure to share it with other lifelong learners in your life so they can enjoy it too. Stay up to date with the show on Facebook and Instagram at Cam Otis Show, and subscribe to our channel on YouTube so that you're the first to hear about new episodes and other special content. Now let's get back to the show.
This answers a bit.
Definitely, but it brings up actually something else I was thinking of, which this is a podcast I listened to earlier this week. It's always funny how these things tend to relate with each other with whatever conversation I'm having. But there was a conversation with a few different people talking about gender roles and marriage and these type of things. And one of them brought up a really interesting point, how there's kind of this flip that happens. How the gap that you're talking about where it's like I'm the breadwinner, I'm bringing things home, and that gap and the animosity that can create because the partner is not out contributing financially, they might not have as much responsibility in that sense. But somebody brought up a really interesting point, which was that's kind of the young marriage, I guess we put it that way, to put it there, that 10 years down the line, it flips completely. And it's kind of this really ironic flip of then it's, to take the traditional gender roles of the woman then is I'm doing everything for the kids, you're not doing anything. And it kind of flips the responsibility curve a little bit there. And I think it's funny because this came up in that conversation, and Dad, we've joked about back in our rugby days, there's two answers to every question. It's protect the golden egg and communication. So when we talk about these type of things and you see the irony in that flip and things like that and everything else we're talking about, I just got to ask, is it really just communication? Is it that simple?
No, it's not only communication, it's a big part of it. It's a huge part of it, communication essentially. But overall, it's not even only transformation, because letting go, letting in is cracking your code of transformation. But what is behind that is evolution. Mm-hmm. It's progress. It means that you evolve to be, kind of like, that's why I use these sometimes not sexy sounding words like interdependence or so, because what does it mean? So like, yeah, but you can't jump, for example, from dependence land, from kind of like being codependent into interdependence. You can't do that jump. You have to experience your independence first. And it goes in both ways. And yes, there are these typical gender roles that existed for so long are shifting. I see this all the time. I see many role reversals, and also the acceptance rate is changing in doing that. So if I The VIP at home says, so I'm doing this for you. I'm bringing, I'm growing up the kids. So I'm the mother. I'm bringing up the kids here. So and then in 5 years, I want you to do kind of like your part. And so that's sometimes when the communication is important to really be on the same level again, and therefore. You can't have that straight conversation if one of the partners, which is typically what happens, is on a codependent level and not on an equal eye-to-eye level. And therefore the communication is totally different. And you see the shift automatically, because it's more like, is it okay if you support me in this regard? And I would be happy and delighted if I can help you in that regard. So it is a total different approach. And it's like, I don't think you're supporting me enough. So, you see the difference? So it's kind of like, so it is, the communication is the expression, is the effect of what lays beneath. And so when we tackle these underlying issues, you're free to go, and you're not just walking around and thinking about these internal issues. Well, for some time at the beginning, yes, but over time it just becomes natural because you adopt these new beliefs that you create for yourself that are more positive and hopeful. And we do this in all 7 areas of life, for example, and then, of course, bringing it together with your loved ones and your family, so that also even the kids can feel that. And they're very young, of course. They are much easier to kind of like draw that in and taking that position, because they want to mirror you, because they love you, because they think like, hey, that's the best thing I can see around here. But again, it's the communication is I think it's is the issue at the beginning, but it shouldn't be kind of like the end of it. So there's more to it always.
I want to shift gears just a little bit, because I find I'm really interested to learn about, because this is a touchy-feely sort of thing. There's no other way around it, at least coming from my perspective. I think you know that. But one of the things that I've seen with high performers that we're talking about, CEOs, these guys and gals that are running these businesses, they are always worried about the bottom line. And what's the ROI? What's the ROI? How do you shape or help them understand that there's more to it? You know what I mean? This having better relationships, having better home life, and how it affects you going forward in your business will make your business more successful. But a lot of people don't see those dots.
I absolutely agree, and there's a lack of awareness in the corporate space. So when because I also work with medical professionals, there are numbers out there. Every second medical professional experience burnout in their practice. So could it be you? If you're listening and if you're a medical professional. So, and you have to bring this awareness also to the corporate space. There are not numbers like in the Medscape reports or what's out there. And so, but because typically corporate doesn't communicate so likely about burnout rates. But I think, COVID did in that regard a good job, because the awareness is opening up, let's put it that way. So it's really kind of like, it's more leaning towards more and more are opening up to other solutions, to problems that hinder them, that block them from their ROIs. And what's in it from the corporate perspective, because they're kind of like the highly paid performers on that level. So it's really the same as if we're talking about any athletes, top athletes in sports. So if they are not up to their game, there's millions of dollars kind of like at risk. So that is the awareness, but to making the connection that there is a field that is kind of like was always the blind spot in corporate. Now it's gaining more and more traction in the medical professional fields, because they experienced it a lot during COVID. So, and also the violence rate at home has increased drastically during COVID because people were kind of like had to stay at home and with a different habit now living together, where they before that were kind of like, yeah, I was at work and there. So everybody had their realm, so to speak. So they had to communicate with each other more. And so that kind of like on the tragical side led to a lot of increase of in domestic violence. But the numbers are there. So it's really kind of like we're on a pivotal point in that development, that more and more awareness, and I'm set out to bring more awareness to corporate and of course to medical professionals to see that connection, which was a blind spot before.
I'm really curious, what kind of differences do you see in the application of what you teach from the medical professionals to the business executives? Because those are, to put people into boxes, those are two different types of people. So what kind of differences do you see in the way they handle?
Are they?
Go ahead. I'll throw it to you.
Are they so different? So I hope we are all humans. So I see it really from the human perspective. So their workload, their environment is different, but the pressure and I would say 20 years ago, I would say that kind of like in the medical field, we didn't have too much of all these narrowed down issues. You have to fulfill all these straitjackets and stuff like that. So it wasn't there so much. So people they really looked into your eyes, not only because computers weren't invented yet, so because they really had to look into your eyes and talk to you, but now they're just looking into computers, and it's a different kind of pressure and how to do their job. And so because the medical professionals I spoke with, I was like, I went into this because I want to heal people. So right, and so then they have to become business owners, and then they have to become, administrators. And so there's a ton of stuff that is really kind of like where, it just blends over, and not only from the human perspective, but also from the requirements that society puts the pressure on to both of them. So I don't see that much of a difference there. Maybe they see that still in their fields, that, this is different, and yeah, they're more in their self-chosen silos, so to speak, but I want to break that. So it's really kind of like, no, there's no difference. This is really about us as humans and as for humanity.
In that human component there, sorry, I got to follow up there, Dad, because this is one thing I was thinking ahead of time for this is, we've talked some about this on the show, but when you get into psychology and behavioral sciences and all those type of things, there is a kind of built-in bias of a lot of the research is done in America by American professors and those type of things, that it does create some kind of layers of bias compared to human behavior in other countries. And I'll be honest, I don't have this into a perfectly boiled down question, but I just want to hear your perspective on that, because that's when you start to paint that gap, that can be a huge thing, or it could be something that we're making bigger than it is, because it's still just the human component at the core there. What are your thoughts?
I think that it's true that just think in terms of, even if from a broader perspective, every science that exists is kind of like only a different perspective on the same things. So mathematics, physics, cybernetics, they all, try to explain something, that, we find the communication, the words, with mathematic words, with physics words. So it's just the interpretation is different, but we're all describing the same issues here. So at the end of the day, it's kind of like we created these silos and these expert silos, which I'm not a friend of, because it's, it's always kind of like that vertical thinking I'm more of like a horizontal thinker. So it's like, hey, how can we grow something that grows horizontally on both sides? Let me just juggle that. So there's one side that grows faster. Okay, cool. Then the other side supports each other. Then just growing vertically, and then poof, you explode. And what's going to happen then? So that's not the solution, and it's just really the view. And the bias is only because, to go back to your question, is part of that. It's an expression of that. It's the justification of like, yes, but it's my perspective, my point of view. So I invite everybody to think more in terms of systems. Because we are, as humans, we are a system, and I really encourage everybody to think more of like, what does it mean to think systemically, not systematically, but systemically. Really, it's system thinking. That is what will help us to cross these borders of biased one side to the other, or this is only happening in this environment. So we need to find where's the correlation between these biases, where's the common ground again, where's the bigger lever in the system, and what does it mean to us as humans?
I'm a huge fan of the systems in our life, the routines, and because I always tell people, hey, by the way, you create systems and processes in your business to create greater efficiency and save money, make more profit, right?
Yeah.
What about yourself? How are you doing that? I mean, that's really the same thing. And I'm fascinated by it, and James Clear talks about that, and the habits and the systems that we create from those habits in our life is how we gain and improve in our life. And kind of following that, what do you mentioned a little bit about the trend of corporations starting to see a little bit more on the human side. And when you look back in what's, here in the U.S., and I haven't been reading the paper in the German paper in quite some time, but here in the U.S., a lot of layoffs at high, big announcements. The latest one I read this morning was Rivian, the electric truck company, makes electric pickups, laying off 6%. Google, 15,000 people. I don't remember what the percentage is, but all these sort of things. How does that, because they're doing it for, well, one opinion is they're doing it to appease the stockholders. How does a leader of a corporation that has that kind of outside influence, stakeholders, handle that situation better, following your philosophy?
Well, there's more to it, Otis, and this would require another show, but I would say that much.
All for that.
Yes, so what we experience today is not just happening over the last couple of years. So because we are in the digital transformation, and we are in it for almost 25 years now. And so what we experience is that exponential curve part where it goes really steep, right? So first 20 years, it just takes almost nothing happens. And now, the last couple of years, it's getting steeper and steeper. So that's the environment we're in. So we need to shift the way we think about thinking. We need to shift the way how we make business. And this comes back to what I shared earlier. If you just put what I just said, as you mentioned, as a philosophy, you can put it out as a methodology for how to create other businesses that are ready and able to ride the digital transformation wave. Because what happened since 25 years is that corporations are stuck in the industrial age. So not only it's about, communication had to shift, there's a lot of other things that can shift because of the way how we are connected and what it means that we are connected in that regard. And so we can create, there's a couple of IT stuff out there. So, the Internet of Things, right? You see that all over again. But before we can create that, we need to create an Internet of Services. So we're not ready to always do that. And you know, there's so much potential. There's the blue ocean is literally in front of us. We just have to be ready to let in and allow ourselves to step into that mindset and create and design something that is open to us, because it's a new paradigm we're diving into. And the last paradigm shift that much was happening when we went from into the industrial age, and that was 120 years ago. So really kind of like coming from craftsmanship and so into the industrial age, it's a similar shift we are experiencing right now. So if you're talking about how this corporate cannot look at something, you know, of that dimension from a perspective, how will I survive? So, and me being kind of like helping the most important components, the family at home and the CEOs on the other side, kind of like, so help you to master that, because you have to experience the transformation for yourself, the paradigm shift from dependence then into being who you can be, who you really can, and determine who you can be, you know, for yourself first, before you can make these shifts with your company. And so it goes hand in hand. So that is a little bit a longer answer to that question, but I told you there's a way more to explore in that regard.
I think you touched on something that I think is extremely important, and I'll reemphasize it in the fact that you have to determine who you want to be before you can really lead your company or anybody else. And I think so many people, to include high performers, are once they hit a point, they're going through the motions, and there's really no, well, what can I do next sort of vision, or how can I do this better? And I think that's a huge issue, that what you're talking about helps people better understand what they can do and have that clearer picture for
the only constant is constant change. So, and you know, when I was describing the context we're living in, kind of like that exponential course, that means you have to change, transform almost, you know, more frequently, not only from a business perspective, but also from a personal perspective for yourself, with your relationships, with the way you work, you also retreat, and you know, there's so much thing, and also the openness that we talked earlier about is also important. Regarding there's you know, more and more business organizations open them up to the spiritual world. So there's so much more services that are available. You know, just look at your cap, you know, tribe and purpose, right? So let's bring it back to you, Otis. So, you know, there's more to it. There's purpose beneath everything, and we have to redefine it and be more flexible for the future, because one is certain, absolutely, in business, your flexibility determines your success rate.
That's a great quote right there. Your flexibility determines your success rate, and it reminds me. You know, I've had this conversation several times this past week with clients, in that getting out and discovering or defining what your self, your proposition value that you bring as yourself. But the guys that I'm working with have been team guys. And how they can still have that attitude of, here's what I bring, here's what I want to do for the first time in their life, right? Here's what I want to do, without feeling narcissistic, selfish, you know, self-indulging. Have you run across that with any of your clients, in that shift from, I got to take care of myself, in order to take care of the others?
It's a very important component of that process. To be more of who you are means that you can, you have the the responsibility. And I use the word responsibility. Really, you have the ability to respond, literally, really, for yourself, and that makes you a better leader. So you can lead because you show them how it's done. So it's not kind of like so it's just so interconnected with each other. And of course, when you are talking about the negative sides of that equation, of course, that is what I mentioned earlier. That is when we talk about, okay, letting go of that old blockages, that old ballast that we carry with us. And we all have those, right? We all have these patterns, reoccurring patterns, kind of like a stop sign showing up in your face, like, hey, I'm here again, why, hey? And you're kind of like wondering, why is this happening? Because, I've dealt with it before, and, it's showing up again. But what it is, essentially, is that is connected to your belief system that you created in the past without knowing better, as a reaction to something that happened to you as an extraordinary incident. Of course, you didn't know better then, but you know now. And that helps you to really get into that and let in something else that is there to be determined by yourself, so you can be in charge, and that makes you the person that you can be. And of course, if you want to be a jerk, well, you can decide to be that, but I don't think that that's the aspiration that most of us have, because after you feel something really, a burden that you carry so much time, and you feel, finally I could let it go, then there is so much joy that you can replace it with, that pops up in that very moment, and you don't think about being a jerk. So you really think about, oh gosh, this is what I always wanted, it's underneath.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful, man. This is another one of those shows where I go back and I look at what my notes, and I was like, dang, did I learn that? Yeah. Did I learn that? Yeah. Did I learn that? And I'm just, it's a top 10 what did I learn list out of one show, it feels like. But I'm going to go back to the thing. It's such a simple phrase, but it's so profound that it bears repeating. And in my old Army ways, this is the foot stomper, guys. You got to let it go so you can let it in. You let all those negative feelings go so you can let that happiness and joy back into your life. And it's so simple. Let it go to let it in. So, Army guys out there, you all know what the foot stomper means. And I'll just explain it for everybody else. When the instructor's up on the podium and says, phrase whatever, like this, let it go to let it in, they stomp their foot. That means you better write that down because it's going to be on the test. So that's not only something I learned, but it's the foot stomper for me. Camden, how about you? What'd you learn?
Uwe, you said something about horizontal thinking, and I hadn't really thought about that kind of a perspective before. That I think that's really interesting. We've talked about on the podcast before, like the functionality of depth, of like there's not much of a point diving entirely in on one silo, as you put it, because then you can't really connect it to everything else, and it's all connected. So I like the way you put that, horizontal thinking, and I'm going to start applying that.
Oh, wonderful. Well, I must say that you just said it perfectly. So it's a foot stomper. So that is something I would love to just somehow embed in my next speeches or whatever I do, kind of like using that analogy. And if I may, I think it's an effective way to make it clear that, hey, this is really something that you need to write down. So, well, no, but I learned so much more about your compassion that you both bring to a conversation like this. And Otis, we had so much fun, and you came also in the pretext of this conversation. It was really a pleasure to connecting with both of you and having this conversation today. So I'm very grateful for that.
Well, thank you. And well, excuse me. I made it almost through the whole show without having to do that. Uwe, how do folks find you? What's the best way to learn what you got going on? I know you've got an event coming up very soon. Tell us a little bit about what you got.
Thank you for the opportunity, Otis. So, yes, I think the easiest way is to go to my website. It's www.uwedokhorn.com. uwedockhorn.com. That's UWEDOCKHORN.com. And you find kind of like a sort of resources. You find a quiz, what's your number one hidden stress relief blocker. Also, we do regular live demonstrations of the AIM experience. That's my program. And this is essentially, it's all about how you and your life partner can enjoy more intimacy and adventures and be more of who you are without compromise or guilt and in 90 days. And so that is a pure demonstration. Your credit card is safe. It's really what we do every first Tuesday. You find everything on my website and much, much more. And also my podcast that you have been also a guest to. It's called Lift Off with Energizing Results.
Awesome. And yeah, thank you again for having me on your show. That was a lot of fun. Thank you so much for your time this evening for you. It's been great having you on our show.
Thank you so much. The best time I could have spent on Groundhog Day will always be with you two. So thanks so much.
That's right.
Got a new tradition.
That's right. There we go. Camden wrote us out.
All right. Thank y'all for listening to the Cam Otis Show, and a special thanks to our guest, Uwe Dockhorn, for joining us today. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to pass it along to someone else so they can enjoy it too. Make sure to follow the Cam Otis Show on Facebook and Instagram, and you can watch full videos of the show on our YouTube page. While you're there, make sure you hit that subscribe button too. As always, the full archive of our episodes is available at www.camandotisshow.com. Thanks again, and we'll see y'all next time.